Welcome to another episode of Rugby Lives Here, our look at Singapore rugby. And today we will go and have a special conversation on women's rugby in Singapore. I have Victoria, Vanessa, and Fauzia, who are part of the Women's Rugby Development Officer initiative that is part of SRU. But just want to get to know a little bit about you girls first before we touch on women's rugby in general. Fauzia, have to say, you're the oldest of the group, so we'll start with you. How did you get into rugby in Singapore?
So basically, I've always watched rugby as a young person. But like in Singapore, I've got 4 kids who are involved in rugby, and they're involved in a junior club. So because to help them, I got involved in coaching. So I've been coaching in junior rugby for about 3 years now. I've tried a little bit of social rugby playing in one of the women's clubs here in Singapore. And so now I'm heavily involved in the coaching in junior rugby, and I've kind of got myself involved in this developing women's rugby in Singapore as well. It's a great sport to be involved in.
Fantastic. Vanessa, for yourself, and Victoria, both Singapore women's rugby players.
Yep.
How did you get into rugby?
So for the both of us, we came in through the program called Crosscode. So we joined in 2017, about the second year after it was launched. Then thereafter, we never looked back.
I played touch football in school, but then I didn't know that there was actually a women's rugby scene in Singapore. So it was only after my exams that a senior of mine introduced rugby to me and asked me to go down for the cross-code trials. And then I've started playing since then.
So now we know the background of the girls, and it's important because you 3 are involved in the Women's Rugby Development Officer program. So Fauzia, could you tell us a little bit more about this program?
So basically we got together where we started looking at the rugby scene for women in Singapore. Vanessa and Vic as players and myself as a coach, and with a lot of girls getting involved in rugby. And the idea was to really showcase women in rugby and look at it from a point of view where it is strategically the strongest growth area for rugby globally. And we looked at it in Singapore and said, how can we contribute to that growth? How can we keep the game alive? And it's like 3 brains better than just one working on its own. And we got together and we decided to go out into the community and talk to the community, find out where the what's working, what's not, getting their feedback. And really the operative word here is community. And we are just 3, like the tip of the iceberg, in a sense that through us, we're hoping that more and more women would get involved in developing the game, keeping it alive, keeping it vibrant. That's where we kind of came in to say, let's start it and see where it goes.
Vanessa, so I know there was a focus group at the very start and to look
right.
at the issues surrounding women's rugby. What were some of the touch points on that?
So one of the most important one was leadership in rugby, because many leaders now are like male dominant. So we are trying to hopefully by the end of like these focus groups, we can like have more women representation. And there's also perception of women's rugby. So rugby is not a sport that like many females will know, especially at schools. So one of our goal is to bring it into schools.
Vanessa touched on 2 very, very good points on that we were looking at. So when we started going out there and talking to the community, the first thing we did was we run a survey, and we had a strategic plan on which areas we need to focus on, because there's so much out there that you can really do. But we focused on 5 things, and Vanessa just touched on the leadership and the perception, the negative perception rugby has for women. But we also looked at the competition structure, which is retention. We looked at participation, so really engaging rugby for girls at a very young age and then clearing a pathway for them until they reach like national level or senior level. And we also looked at like club culture, what clubs can do in order to not just recruit, retain, but also to encourage girls to join and say that it's not a game just for men. So those 5 areas were where we kind of started.
Yeah, let's touch on a couple of them. Victoria, why is there a negative perception on women in rugby in Singapore?
I think because from a very young age, rugby is firstly viewed as a contact sport. So there's a lot of content involved. And at primary schools and secondary school level, it's usually for males, right? There's only boys rugby for these level. So what we want to do is we want to see where we can change that perception. So whether it's from a young age or from the parents' perspective, how can we, sort of market rugby to cater, that, hey, girls and women can play also. So how do we go about doing that? And so with the focus group discussions, that's when we get, suggestions from the community, and we problem solve this problem together.
I think a lot of parents would be worried about, their poor girl getting hurt, but have you needed to clear up some perceptions or misconceptions about rugby to them?
Absolutely. It is a contact sport, and it's not unique in rugby. In any contact sport, there is that possibility of injury. But I think where the sport has come up over the years, from my time until now, is that now you've got good medical support on site. So, that's a good thing. That's a positive improvement that has happened, and you can let parents know that it's not like your child gets hurt or your son, whatever, and they're left on their own on the pitch. So that's a good thing. That's a good development, and we kind of try to encourage parents to understand that. But it's also, for girls, it was like the negative body image that you either have to be bulky in order to play rugby or you get bulky. And the message out there is now, it's not bulky, it's not big, it's strong. So kind of, using the same words to change the perception, saying that you get strong and fit, you don't necessarily get bulky. And it's for all body image, it's for all body sizes. There's always a place in rugby regardless.
I also like to touch on the pathway. I think we spoke off air that there is rugby for kids, and then at the elite for club, and then national level, that's where it stands as well. But in between, there might be an issue where there is a gap, Vanessa. And is that something that you've spoken to people, and that's what they've said as well?
Yeah. So one of the issues that we face is that so we have all the way under 8, under 10s, under 11s. But then during the pre-pubescent age, about 11 to 19, when they are in MOE schools,
Yeah.
it's very hard to introduce rugby into schools because of the risk involved. So yeah, that's one of the issues that we are trying to work it out and see if we can bring in a modified version of rugby into schools. Yeah.
Okay, so now we know the issues. You've had the focus group. What is next?
So right now we're on the stage where we've come up with the solutions. So now we're going to be presenting it to the management committee in SRU. Hopefully after that we can implement the calendar that that the community has come and helped build with, and yeah, hopefully we can implement the events that we planned on the calendar.
How long are we looking at this? You're charting a calendar for 6 months, 12 months. What's the calendar going to look like?
So like half a year. So there'll be a lot of filler events, and then towards the end it's the 7th and 15th league.
Do you feel like you're always competing against the men to get the attention away from them, and like, hey, shine the light on women's rugby, Fauzia?
But I think that's exactly what we're doing. We are shining the light, we are creating the right vibe, we are creating a buzz about women's rugby, because it has been there, but maybe not enough people were talking about it. And the only people who can really start that conversation are the women who are playing the game. So I think we are on our pathway to doing that. And essentially, part of our plan is to get everybody involved in a webinar where we can discuss the 5 areas that we talked about individually as a group, but now really come together as a community and go on a webinar and say, like, this is where we are heading, and this is all because of their input. And what a fantastic way to launch something like for women's rugby.
I mean, results-wise, I think the women kind of maybe edge the men in competitions. Do you feel like, in you playing for Singapore, representing Singapore, that perhaps you feel like, oh, I deserve a little bit more attention than what I'm getting?
I mean, definitely, right? We all want our hard work that we put in to be recognized. And when it comes to public perception also, the problem lies in them not knowing there's women's rugby in the first place. So definitely when you look at, through the public eye, you wouldn't see women's rugby as much because there's not a lot of coverage, for women's rugby. So I think right now, yeah, sure, we want the light to shine on us, but we would need people to, cater their attention towards us, yeah.
They're in an official role, the Women's Rugby Development Officer. Do you feel like the three of you have huge burden on you to like grow women's rugby right now because as you said, the spotlight should be on women rugby in Singapore, but then the three of you are like the ones that need to help it grow. Do you feel like there's an expectation to help it grow now, Vanessa?
I wouldn't say it's a burden, and because like there's the three of us, right? And I think we all have a common goal, which is like to improve, to make women's rugby more recognized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And I guess also before this, there were already a lot of women who are pioneering in the sport and like
Yeah.
trying to get traction to increase the participation in women's rugby. So we're definitely not alone in this in
Yeah.
this big project, because before us there has already been a lot of people who put in the effort,
Yeah.
and we're just trying to take the torch and then lead to
Yeah.
another way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the past it was individuals who were trying to do it without the support, but now there's a group of you,
Yeah.
and obviously you can bring and engage the rest to help grow the sport. You've sorted out the problems, you know the problems, what the problems are, you're trying to sort it out, you have a roadmap for the next 6 months. At the end of it, what would be the dream scenario? Each of you could chime in, but Fauzia, we'll start with you. The dream scenario after 6 months, perhaps.
I guess if we can just get, I mean, definitely, as I said, more people talking about women's rugby. But if I had to narrow it down to specifics, I'd like to, a dream would be for me personally, to see a lot more schools, girls' schools, having some form of rugby introduced into their program, into their schools. So if currently we have 10, a dream would be to maybe see 20 or something at the end of 6 months, through these efforts,
Yeah.
where they're willing to try rugby. Yeah, and
Are those
just,
hard conversations that you need to have with schools in terms of like, trying to convince them, hey,
Yeah,
add in
and-
rugby
and-
into the program?
So one of the things that SRU is also on the back of that trying to do is introduce Tag Rugby, which is like a Get Into Rugby program, an initiative by World Rugby, to say that, well, you don't have to immediately go into contact, but Tag Rugby is like a launch pad for introducing the basic skills of rugby, and providing that transition for someone who doesn't want to immediately do contact to try rugby and then maybe transition into contact. And that would be great for girls in their program. So yeah, something like that, if that could just really become vibrant and visible in the schools for girls, I think that would be a
Yeah.
great start.
Is it at the end of the day, you just want participation, more
yeah,
participation?
that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
So to add on that, hopefully after we have like recruited like more people, get more people on board this sport, then we can have like more divisions for the competitions that we have now. Because for the competitions that we have now, most of the time, even round robin, right, we have to play each team, like each club, twice. So yeah, it would be good if like there are more people, and then definitely there'll be more teams, and yeah, everyone gets more playing time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if there are people watching and they want to, try and give their input and try and help grow, women rugby in Singapore, is there a way, is there an email, or how can they get in touch, or should they just get in touch with SRU? What's the best way to go about that, Victoria?
I mean, you can take a look at Singapore Rugby's social media. So we have Facebook, Instagram, and connect with any of us. And if you're keen to start up your own like rugby program in schools, you can just send us an email or drop us a DM, and I'm sure one of us will be able to connect with you.
I think really, really exciting times for women's rugby. I think this is a great initiative. Really looking forward, as they said, a 6-month plan. Hopefully we'll grow and we'll see more participation in schools, and hopefully that will filter through to the club levels and produce more women national team players for Singapore. Fantastic. Fauzia, Vanessa and Victoria, fantastic stuff. This is a great episode of Rugby Lives Here, trying to shine the spotlight on women rugby, and we'll see you for the next episode of Rugby Lives Here.